This is Afghanistan, a landlocked country of approximately 43 million people in Central and South Asia, bordered by 6 countries, at the intersection of every major trade and invasion route the ancient world used. In August 2021, the Taliban returned to power after 20 years. In the 3 years that followed, the Taliban government issued more than 50 decrees specifically targeting women and girls, removing them from schools, from universities, from most workplaces, from public spaces without a male guardian, and eventually from the sound of their own voices in the presence of unrelated men. What follows is a factual account of what was removed, what remains, and what it costs a country to run this experiment on half of its own people. The period between 2001 and 2021 was not a golden age for Afghan women. It was uneven, incomplete, largely urban, and dependent on foreign presence and funding in ways that made it fragile before it collapsed. But it was real. By 2021, Afghanistan had approximately 3.5 million girls enrolled in school. Women made up roughly 21% of the country's civil service. There were women judges, women parliamentarians, women police officers, women professors, women doctors, women journalists, and women entrepreneurs in every major Afghan city. The Afghan Constitution of 2004 guaranteed equal rights regardless of sex. The guarantee was imperfectly enforced. It existed. Kabul University had female students in every faculty. Women worked in the Ministry of Finance, in the Attorney General's office, in the newsrooms of Tolo News and One TV. A woman was the mayor of Maidan Shar. Women ran shelters for survivors of domestic violence in Kabul, Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif, and Jalalabad. In the rural south and east, the picture was different. Girls' schools had always faced resistance in Pashtun-majority areas. Female mobility outside the home had always been more restricted. The gains of the 2001-2021 period were thinner there and had been bought against sustained local opposition. The women who made those gains knew exactly how fragile they were. They were right. The Taliban entered Kabul on the 15th of August 2021. The government of Ashraf Ghani dissolved without military resistance. The president left the country the same day. In the weeks that followed, Taliban spokesmen gave press conferences in which they described a version of their government that would be more moderate than their first period in power, from 1996 to 2001. Women would be allowed to work and study, they said, within the framework of Islamic law. The framework was not defined at the press conference. It was defined in the decrees that followed. Secondary schools for girls were closed in September 2021, 1 week after they were permitted to reopen. The reason given was that appropriate uniforms and gender-segregated facilities had not been arranged. The schools did not reopen. Universities were closed to women in December 2022. The decree came without warning on a day when female students were already on campus. They were told to leave. Some of them had been days from finishing their degrees. NGO work by women was banned in December 2022. Work for the United Nations by Afghan women was banned in April 2023. Beauty salons, one of the few private sector spaces where women could work and where female clients could move without male oversight, were closed in July 2023. By the end of 2023, women were prohibited from most formal employment, from most education above the primary level, from parks, from gyms, from public baths, from speaking loudly enough to be heard by unrelated men, and from appearing in public without a male guardian called a mahram, a father, brother, husband, or son. The decrees came incrementally, 1 month to the next, each one narrowing the boundary of what was permitted. The incrementalism was not accidental. Each decree tested the response before the next one came. The response, from inside Afghanistan and from outside it, was never sufficient to stop the next decree. An ordinary day for a woman in Kabul in 2024 begins inside four walls and, for most women, ends inside them. She wakes. She manages the household. If she has young children, she feeds them, manages their clothing, structures their morning. If her children are girls above the age of 12, they do not go to school. They are in the house with her. She may leave the house if a male guardian is available and willing to accompany her. If the guardian is not available, if her husband is at work, if she has no brother, if her father is elderly or unwell, she does not leave. The pharmacy, the market, the doctor's office require a man at her side to access. Women who were professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, describe the specific texture of days that have no professional content. The knowledge is still there. The credential is still on the wall. The years of training are intact inside the body that is not permitted to use them. A gynecologist who delivered babies for 15 years sits at home while women in her neighborhood seek care from male doctors who have less obstetric experience than she does. She answers questions by phone, quietly, when asked. The phone call is not a solution. It is a workaround. There is a difference. Girls who were in school in 2021 and are now teenagers have spent the years that are most critical for educational development at home. A girl who was 9 when the schools closed is now 17 and has had no formal education in the 8 years that, in any other country, would have determined the rest of her intellectual life. The developmental window does not wait for the decree to be lifted. It closes on its own schedule. The economic cost of removing women from the workforce has been calculated by the United Nations Development Program at approximately $1 billion annually, nearly 5% of Afghan GDP. The figure covers direct lost productivity. It does not cover the indirect costs, the health outcomes that worsen when female medical workers cannot practice, the child development consequences of educated mothers kept from their children's education, the business activity that does not happen because half the potential entrepreneurs cannot leave their houses to conduct it. Afghanistan's healthcare system is in measurable decline. Female patients who require examination by a doctor increasingly cannot access care because male doctors are culturally restricted from examining women who are not their relatives, and female doctors are legally restricted from practicing. The two restrictions together produce a gap that fills with untreated illness. Maternal mortality, which had fallen significantly between 2001 and 2021, is rising again. The data is incomplete because the data collection system has also lost many of its female workers. The numbers that exist are bad. The numbers that do not exist are probably worse. Mental health consequences are being documented by the organizations still operating inside the country. Depression, anxiety, and what clinicians describe as a loss of sense of future are reported at high rates among women and girls. A girl who has not been to school in 3 years and who cannot see a circumstance in which she will return is not depressed because of a clinical disorder. She is depressed because her life has been accurately described to her and the description is unbearable. Families are also carrying the economic consequence in specific household arithmetic. A teacher's salary gone, a nurse's salary gone, a civil servant's salary gone. Families that had 2 incomes now have 1. In a country where approximately half the population was already living below the poverty line in 2021, the removal of women's incomes has pushed more households below it. The poverty is not abstract. It is a child eating less. The schools that are not permitted to exist officially exist unofficially in hundreds of locations across Afghanistan. In living rooms, in basements, in the back rooms of shops, in mosques where sympathetic male religious figures provide cover, girls are being taught by women who are risking detention, beatings, and in documented cases worse to continue doing the work the decree forbids. The underground schools are not a comprehensive solution. They reach a fraction of the girls who need them. They operate under constant threat of discovery. The women who run them cannot advertise, cannot expand freely, cannot guarantee continuity if a neighbor reports them or a Taliban patrol comes close enough to notice the pattern of girls entering a house at the same time each morning. They run them anyway. In Kabul, an organization that operates without a public name has been running literacy classes for adult women in a rotating set of locations since 2022. The location changes every few weeks. The women who attend know the current address and tell no one who does not need to know. The teacher who runs the sessions was a secondary school teacher for 11 years. She is 34 years old. She has continued teaching without a classroom, without official recognition, without pay, and without the ability to tell most people in her life what she does each morning. She describes the work in terms that are practical rather than heroic. The women want to learn. She knows how to teach. The decree does not change either of those facts. It only changes where the teaching has to happen. Women who worked in professional fields maintain informal networks through which they continue to contribute to their fields by phone, by encrypted message, and through male colleagues who carry their knowledge into spaces the women cannot enter. A lawyer who cannot appear in court prepares cases for male colleagues to argue. A journalist who cannot report files information to male counterparts who publish it under their own names. The contribution is real. The attribution is impossible. The international response to the Taliban's decrees has been consistent in its condemnation and limited in its effect. The United Nations Security Council has passed resolutions. The UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan has issued reports documenting each restriction in detail. Multiple countries have issued statements. The United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and others have described the treatment of Afghan women as a gender apartheid, a term with legal significance under international human rights frameworks. Afghanistan, under the Taliban, has not been recognized as a legitimate government by any member state of the United Nations. The Taliban govern a country of 43 million people without a single seat at the international table, without diplomatic recognition from any state, and with an economy that is heavily sanctioned and largely cut off from the international financial system. None of this has produced a change in the decrees. The leverage that existed when international forces were present no longer exists. The leverage that exists now, the withholding of recognition, the continuation of sanctions, the pressure of international condemnation has been applied, and the decrees have continued. Each new restriction arrived after the previous one had been condemned, and the condemnation had produced no reversal. Aid organizations still operating in Afghanistan face a constraint that has no clean resolution. Withdrawing humanitarian aid to pressure the Taliban imposes the cost on Afghan civilians, including the women the pressure intends to help. Continuing aid without the ability to employ female staff means operating inside the Taliban's framework and, in some sense, sustaining it. Most organizations have continued operating under the constraint and described the choice as the least bad option available. The women those organizations were employing before December 2022 are at home. A country can be measured by what it does with its daughters. The measurement is being taken in Afghanistan right now, in the specific arithmetic of a girl who is 17 and has not been in a classroom since she was 14. and a woman who is 38 and has not been to work since August 2021. And a gynecologist who answers clinical questions by phone from a house she cannot leave without her brother. And a teacher who moves her classroom every 3 weeks so that the girls who come to it do not lose the thread entirely. The experiment the Taliban is running on half its population has a name in the language of international human rights law. Some UN bodies and legal scholars have used the term gender apartheid to describe a system of governance that excludes women, categorically and by law, from education, most employment, and public life. It has a different name in the language of a girl watching her brother leave for school through a window she cannot walk out of. She does not call it a policy framework. She calls it the reason she is inside instead of on the street with him. The window faces the street. The street is there. The school is 300 meters down it. The distance, in the current decree, is not a distance. It is a wall. 300 meters is nothing. It is the length of 3 city blocks, a walk of 4 minutes at an ordinary pace. Under different circumstances, it would not register as a distance worth naming. Named as a wall, it becomes something else, not a measure of space, but a measure of what is enforced across that space, a decree, and the men employed to see that the decree holds. And the fact that a girl of 17 who tried to walk it anyway would not be walking into a classroom but into a confrontation she has no legal standing to win. The wall was built by men who believe they had the right to build it. The girls on this side of it disagree. They are writing it down in the notebooks of the underground classrooms in the language they are not supposed to be learning, with the pens they are not supposed to be holding. The underground schools are not a single organized network so much as a distributed deniable habit, a teacher, a living room, a rotating set of addresses, a curriculum taught quietly enough that a raid finds nothing but a room of girls visiting a neighbor. The risk is real and unevenly borne. The teacher who organizes the classroom carries more exposure than the girls who attend it. And the practice of moving locations every few weeks is itself a security measure, not a stylistic choice. It is a system built by people with no legal protection, running on trust between families who have decided, independently and then collectively, that the decree will not be the last word on what their daughters know. The notes exist. The wall exists. Both are true at the same time, in the same country, on the same morning.